Welcome to Reframe Your Mindset for Success. With me today, Chelle. How are you today, Chelle?
Hi, Paul. I'm amazingly well, thank you. The sun is actually shining here in Cheshire. So, yeah, I'm a happy lady.
Great stuff. Have you been up to much today? Got much planned for the week?
Well, this week has been an exciting one. I'm in the midst of launching my Authentic to Thrive new product. So, I'm getting all my assets together, talking to as many people as I possibly can, and helping as many people be fabulous. That's the whole plan, isn't it, Paul?
Absolutely. I think that sounds like a great plan. And I know, you're probably going to mention this in a bit, but you recently back off holiday, aren't you, from St. Kitts? Is that right?
Oh my goodness me. Yes. St. Kitts, it's a place from my heritage. I'll talk about that, I'm sure. But yeah, we visited the Caribbean island. It's beautiful. It's the warmer version of where I grew up. But yeah, absolutely loved it. Can highly recommend it.
Excellent. So jealous. I know when you were telling me about it, I was like, oh God, I could do it a few weeks in the sun. Uh, Excellent. So as you know, with the podcast, we always start with your story. So it's your story in as many words as you want to tell it.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you, Paul. Do you know when you asked me this and said, God, Chelle, one of the first things we're going to talk about is you. And I went, this is amazing because talking about yourself can be quite daunting. And it's one of the reasons why I am indeed a mindset empowerment coach. But my story, I'm 48 now, but I think I'm going on about six. And for me, I was always really, really different. You know, I grew up not being normal. I've later found out I'm completely neurodivergent. I'm
Yeah.
completely crazy in a whirlwind. But I'm very much about understanding your own self. So I grew up in the Shetland Isles, which, unlike St. Kitts, I suppose it's the colder version of St. Kitts, because that's actually where my heritage is from. But it's a beautiful, beautiful island, 243 miles away from the UK mainland. But I grew up very differently. I'm a Scottish Caribbean mixed race adoptee. So, you know, I grew up, I was the only person of color, and I was very much a tomboy as well. So I didn't know that pink existed, although pink absolutely lives in my world everywhere you go nowadays. But for me, it was about understanding that emotional roller coaster of who was I and what did that look like. And at times I felt really, really invisible when I grew up.
Yeah.
And I found ways to kind of make myself almost that invincible personality where, you know, you have to thrive rather than just survive. So that's the upshot, you know, and kind of a few years later, my little boy always says to me, Mom, what is it that you do? And I was like, well, darling, I make people happy at work because I don't ever want anybody to feel invisible. So that's really my story and why I do what I do.
Excellent. Excellent. So I know as part of that story and what you do now, a big part of what you've done recently is publish the book.
Oh my God, the book. If anybody has ever decided to write a book, dreamed of doing a book, it's like having a baby. So, Paul, I appreciate you're a man and you might not give birth, but when you actually decide you're going to write a book, it is exactly like that. You cherish it, you love it, you create it. It took me 3.5 years to write my book, but I'm so proud of it. It's a motivational life toolkit book. I liken myself very much to like Ruby Wax on speed. That's what I've been told. It's very much about making sure you can equip yourself, and it's my own story as well. So it brought me a lot of tears and hurt and pain to write it, but actually the feedback I get from people is phenomenal. So I can't be prouder.
Yeah, no, it's excellent. And it's called Because You Matter.
That's the
And I
one.
do like some of the wonderful messages in the book, like being a human being and not doing, being a human doing. So, there's some great content in there.
Thanks, Paul. One of the things I was going to say is, you know, the very first chapter, and this is the one that stood for test of time. So it's a very large book. It's 524 pages long. And when it first started out, it was 130,000 words. I had a lot of words, down to about 80,000. But I do know the very first thing that never ever changed was the first chapter, which is I am not normal, abso-fucking-lutely. So if you like swear words and you love the F word, then you're going to absolutely love this book. But more to the point, it's about understanding your own personal story as well. You know, my story's there for you to read it and enjoy it and learn from it. But I think most importantly is how you're choosing to show up, how you can be real and be seen for who you are. And I think fundamentally that was the reason why I wrote the book. So I wanted everybody to feel amazing.
And picking up on growing up in the Shetland Islands, that in itself is quite an unusual place to come from. But you now live in Cheshire, so what was the path of living in Cheshire? Have you spent quite a lot of time in the UK? Have you where do you spend most of your time now?
Most well, see, I'm lucky enough. I kind of abandoned, not in a bad way, but I decided I didn't like the weather that much in the UK. So I thought, I know what I'll do is I'll save my pennies and I'll buy a house in France. So I bought this amazing house in France, which I thought, I know, we can go and live there, it'd be great. And then of course we had Brexit. So that put paid to that plan. But I'm proudly Scottish. And had I not met my husband James, who's a Yorkshireman, I think I potentially would have spent majority of my time in Scotland. But I have been as far down as London. And what I noticed, London's great, but people don't talk to you as much.
Yeah,
It's like if you
yeah.
pass kind of, they don't, you lose who you are. And for anonymity, it's brilliant. But actually to be immersed in people and that surroundings, I think I found finding coming further up past the M25, so to speak, was definitely where I needed to exist. So Cheshire kind of landed it, and I'm in the heady heights of Winsford, which is a very working class town. I love it, and everybody talks to everybody else. It's wonderful.
I don't know. I'm down the road on the Wirral. Obviously ferry boats across the Mersey from Liverpool. So we like to think that we're very friendly, and I know what you mean.
Yeah,
Going down to London at times. It's people are just busy being busy, aren't they? I think that's what it
yeah.
is more than anything. Because when you do hit the south coast, people are lovely on the south coast when you go down and visit. So I have found that people can be friendly all over the country, but I know what you mean. London is it's something else. So
It absolutely is. I think it's wonderful, but I also think we need to slow down. I think there's something in that
yeah,
if we can stop, just take a moment. And you're right, we're being busy, and I think that that's true for all of us, in all of our lives. Actually, if we can stop and take a breath to accept and understand and acknowledge what we're actually doing and recognize it for what it is and celebrate it, I think that's really, really important.
definitely, yeah, absolutely, and probably links into what I'm going to talk about next because when we first met, I think it was back in 2013. We were at an event in Brussels, in
Yeah.
Belgium, and I think we at the moneysupermarket.com then. Is that right? Am
Oh
I making
my,
that up?
yes, absolutely. Yeah, money super. I was heading up the L&D division there. Yeah, absolutely. Love that job.
Yeah, so to go from working in organizations to now working for yourself, how did you make that jump? How did you make that leap?
Well, now, interestingly, I actually started my very first business in 2007. So about 6 or so years before we met. And I decided to do self-value alongside my own discovery of my own self, I suppose, my own history, my own heritage, which aligned with the training element was about authenticity. And it's really
Yeah,
important. It's not just bums on seats for me. I'm a facilitator, coach, trainer, all that kind of good stuff. But it's not just about creating things that put bums on seats and actually just tick a box for a corporate. It was about how do we get these people to actually empower themselves. And
yeah,
that first kind of started off with my own personal insights into, well, what did I want for me? And by 2006, coaching had only just come into the market from America. So it was very much about like you either went to a counselor or you were broken.
yeah,
And I don't believe that we're broken. We don't need fixing. We know our story, but it's more about what do we want going forward? What do we need that's actually going to be the most beneficial for us?
yeah,
And I think along that authenticity trail, part of the money supermarket story was I became a mother, which was amazing. But I also became a single parent at that point. So I needed to go back and have just a steady income. So Money Supermarket really, really helped me do that. Because as you know, when you work for yourself, it can be quite a challenge just to make sure that everything's organized. But part and parcel for that Money Supermarket situation. And then I went on to do Shop Direct after that, just broaden my horizons to understand, because I'd had Jenners before that and lots of different corporates and organizations. But it did help me really understand that I wanted to go out on my own. Like I really did want to work with a variety of organizations, not just be, and not so much stuck, but be with 500 people, because that's the size of Money Supermarket. It was like, who else can I help? How can I get out there? What can I do? And how can I support a large variety of organizations? So that's really where that stemmed from, is about, I want to help as many people as I can. I'm really
yeah.
driven passionately because of that.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, I worked for organizations for a long time, and done contracting as well. And I think for me, it's about the authentic path in life.
Yeah.
Doing what I do, being in business, allows me to be more authentic and live more authentically. So,
Yeah.
so I guess a lot of it's to do with that and the way that you were explaining it. Yeah.
Oh no, absolutely. And I think, we have to learn, how do we make that positive difference, but not just necessarily for other people, but for ourselves as well. Because, I liken to it being in an aeroplane. If that oxygen mask comes down and you're busy fitting it on other people, what about you? You need to breathe. You need to experience what life is about for you. And one of the things that I think is so important that I say to so many people when I work with them is be unapologetically you. Celebrate who that is, celebrate what that looks and feels like for you, because authenticity isn't just about when things are going well for you, when you're in strength, when you're in flow. It's actually about, well, what happens when the shit hits the fan? What happens when things don't go according to plan? What do we do with that? How do we actually express ourselves? And that's where the human element comes in, is that when you recognize who you are, and I'm very values led, but when you recognize what you have for yourself, you can offer that with authenticity, even when it's really, really, really taxing. And I think that's so, so important.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, as you know, Chelle, the podcast, it's about, reframing your mindset and all about mindset. So
Yeah.
my question is, next natural question is why is mindset so important to you?
Oh my goodness me. Why would it not be? I mean, I chose, at first it was positive disruptor, and now it's mindset empowerment coach. And I think if without a mindset, we have nothing. I always say, I ask people, what do you want? What do you want? And one of the first things, I joke about this when I go into shops and people say, what do you want? I was like, well, I'd love some sanity, thanks. And I think sanity is really important, but we need to recognize, we choose our own self-worth. And we all matter, the good, the bad, the ugly. And it's not just habits that they don't define you. It's about every day, what lessons are you learning? How are you communicating that to yourself? And you'll note when you read the book, and I'm sure you have already, you mentioned some of the chapters in it, but one of the ones that I'm really proud of is the crown of acceptance, because when we put that crown on our own head, we look to ourself for acceptance and that self-worth, rather than looking to everybody else. I've worked with thousands of people now, and I absolutely love what I do. But a lot of the themes that come up is, well, I'm looking for everybody else to tell me how fantastic I am, or just accept me for who I am. And it's not about that. It's about, how can you put that crown of acceptance on you? Stop waiting for everybody else to recognize you, because this isn't, as Ruby Wax would say, this isn't a life rehearsal. It's not an understudy. You don't get a second chance at it. This is it. So how can we actually have that, even when, life isn't a bed of roses, even when we're showing up when we are in struggle? So I always aim to take the leap and celebrate who you are, even if it scares the shit out of you, which it does regularly.
Excellent. So I did like that chapter in the book, and I do like the metaphor as well. On the basis of that, how would you describe your mindset then?
Oof, right. Okay. My mindset. I love this question. How would I describe my mindset? Very tenacious. I think because of the way that I'm built, so I have more labels than you can throw a cat at. The cat has lives, literally. So I have borderline personality disorder. I'm neurodivergent. I'm an adoptee. I'm a divorcee. Like, you name it, I've got it. And one of the things that I notice is in mindset is I have a highly critical, anxious mindset for the most part. So naturally, as human beings, there's a 3-in-1 chance that we're going to revert to the negative. So I call that the devastating Daves, or the meltdown Marys, or we go to the catastrophizing Chris's. Oh my God, this is going to be a disaster, rather than to what I would phrase as your motivating Matts. So if we know that to be true, and we have a reaction on something, and we know that we're going to react potentially negatively, then we have to learn how to channel that energy. And I would say my tenacity has been built on, I recognize that my default is not necessarily an easy place. If you've read chapter 10 in the book, you'll know that, the love and hate, that I tolerated myself for many, many years because of the backdrop that I had to my own life. And this is where the reality kicks in. It's not about being happy, clappy American. It's not, and I say that respectfully, it's not about being woohoo, everything's amazing. It's about understanding, how do you show up and what can you do that's going to make the best and the most positive difference to yourself. So my mindset, when I'm having a really good day, everybody knows I'm having a really good day. When I'm having a really difficult day, and I'd say either I'm emotionally turbulent or challenged or things are going on, I say I'm surviving. I'm surviving because I'm alive. I'm alive and kicking. But my emphasis there is I'm kicking because I want to thrive. I want to get to that point where, I'm bombshelling my own self into positive action, not just only helping other people do that, but what do I need for me to enable me to show up? And that means dropping a lot of baggage, Paul. Genuinely, it's like checking into an airport and going, right, I know everybody talks about flying first class and getting 32 kgs or 23 kgs of luggage. I want hand luggage for myself, but also for everybody else too. And that's the mindset that I hold every day is what do I need to drop so that I can make sure I'm focused and I am actually being values led? Because for me, authenticity, you have to be true to who you are. Otherwise, there'd be no point me changing my surname to Verity for it, So authenticity is really important, but making a difference is vitally important too, with passion, but protecting yourself as well. So having that psychological protection, that physical protection, that emotional protection. So all of these things combine to create a mindset that means that I feel invincible as the biggest opportunity. And if I don't, then I'm heading towards it.
Makes sense. Really does. And on the basis of that, I know that there's lots of content in the book that talks to this, but on a day-to-day basis, I know you talked about dropping baggage there. What are the tools or techniques that you use to maintain your mindset?
Maintaining mindset, there's something that I use regularly, which is called the 3 Ps. Very, very simple concept. So the 3 Ps stands for prisoner, passenger, and partner. So in terms of your mindset, Paul, you have an approach to things. Everything that happens in your life, you're going to either have to do because it's a task, or you're going to react to, or you're going to make a response to. That's a given. It doesn't even matter if it's just you opening a window. There's going to be wind that comes in the window, or there's rain or sunshine. So we're always going to have a reaction to something. And what I certainly say to a lot of people is understanding where your mindset is and actually being able to recognize it and acknowledging it for what it is. So for example, you might have what I call a prisoner mindset, like you've got to do something. I'll give you an example, a prime one this morning. We've got a new dog called Freddie. He's amazing. He's lovely, but he's learning the ropes in our household. And what he did yesterday was he ate our other dog's dinner, which you'd think that's okay, it's not a problem, except of course his digestion system is different. He's a younger dog. So this morning we woke up and there was sick practically everywhere, all over. It was just everywhere, and he just kept on being sick. So we now know not to feed him that particular dog food, which is fine. It's all about learning. But then there's different mindsets you can take to that, which is if you're a prisoner mindset, you walk into it and you go, oh my God. Well, for me, it was like, oh, F, whatever else is going on, and you look at the situation, you go, I'm going to have to tidy this up because nobody else is going to do it. And you get into this whole martyrdom situation where you're having a rant and everything, all your energy is going into negativity. Nobody else cares. Nobody else is up at the moment. Why is this happening to me? Why am I the only one that's dealing with it? All that kind of stuff. Okay. So that's the prisoner mindset that literally imprisons you into that mindset. The other option that you have is you can be a partner and just ignore it, like my son did this morning. I'm damn sure he did this morning. It was hilarious. So to get to the bathroom upstairs, he has to go along the landing from his bedroom. The dog had been sick, also on the stairs and on the landing. To which point I said to him this morning, did you notice the sick? And he said, no, I didn't see it, Mum. I didn't see it, Mum. No, he had this. Okay. So a passenger mindset is very much about, I don't see it. My head's in the sand. I don't want to deal with it. I'm not engaged with the whole surroundings. Okay. Whether that's to avoid the task or whether that's just because you don't want to engage in it. Or the other one, which is where you end up going to if you have that positivity, is the partner mindset, to acknowledge what's gone on and then figure out what's the next best steps and how can you deal with it. So what is it you need to do to enable that to happen? And that's when you're partnering with that situation. We often do that when we have to tidy up the table after dinner. We choose songs, we dance, we kind of have crazy time rather than it just being a chore and being in that prisoner mindset or just going slow, like sometimes the kids do, which is like, if I ignore it long enough, the plates will get moved because Mum will move it for me. So I think, having that toolkit in front of you to recognize first of where are you? So, this morning, I'm not going to lie, I was like, oh my God, I went into the prisoner mindset and then I started to have a rant. I thought, well, actually, what's the learning? The learning is Freddie can't have that food anymore and I'm going to tidy it up.
Yeah.
Yep. So you begin to get into that mindset, but just recognizing where you are. And I think the 3 Ps, so prisoner, passenger, and partner, really, really helps you just reset what's happening and being real about it.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I really like that.
Hmm.
Superb. So on the basis of, the career you've had, if you
Yeah.
look at your mindset and to get to where you are today,
Yeah.
who's actually helped you develop your mindset, or it could be a what's helped you, because might have been a book you've read, or
Yeah. Well, do that's such an amazing question to ask, Paul. There's a few people. I'll reel them all off, but the very first person I think who's helped me with my mindset has been my father. One of the first things he said to me is, "You create your own luck." Because I said to someone, "Oh, that's lucky. That's luck." And he went, "No, no, 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 no." He said, "Luck is preparedness and opportunity. That's your success." So I'd always remembered that. And my dad's a very stoic personality. He's completely opposite to me. He led the household with an iron rod in terms of negative reinforcement. It was about just
yeah,
getting everything right. So, and it was very difficult actually to stand up to that, to be fair. But it did teach me resilience. It taught me tenacity. It taught me my high work ethic. I have really high standards for myself, and having that relentless pursuit for freedom.
yeah.
And whilst I was growing up, one of the people that really stood out to me was Nelson Mandela. And I say that not lightly. I say that being a mixed race female, growing up in a time where apartheid was real. I took modern studies when I had Mr. McWhinney was my teacher. I absolutely loved him. He was amazing. He brought on board what modern studies actually was. We talked about apartheid. And as we were learning about it, the whole environment was changing. So that was literally at the time when apartheid was becoming non-existent, and there was that whole relentless pursuit for freedom that Nelson was talking about, but in terms of having that democratic government and living through it at that point. And just to clarify, I used to have a nightmare when I was little because my parents are both white. I used to dream, or rather have nightmares about they'd go to South Africa on a plane, and as soon as I get off the plane, I'd be separated from them. I'd be
Oh
like, just because of the color
no.
of my skin. And I'd be like, oh my God, I used to have dreams about volcanoes as well, but that was other things. But this one was quite a big one in terms of, the dream that I had. So from my perspective, having that harmony to be able to live together and just having that understanding that the mindset that it's not about losing, it's
Yeah,
about you either
yeah,
win or you learn. And the whole concept of, being in prison that Nelson Mandela had was he spent 27 years in prison, but actually we can live a life and be in prison because we never learn how to release that fear or that resistance or that anger to certain things that have gone on. And I just love the whole concept of wisdom and hope and peace and the way that he actually, helps people be inspirational. And I really love that. And he's definitely got a place on my boardroom table. There's a few people that have him a boardroom table, but he's definitely up there heading it. So yeah, I would definitely say he's incredibly important. And another couple of people as well. There's a chap called Ben Williams. Ben Williams. So he was my very first boss. When I worked for Ben Williams Corporate Psychology, my first job, and also Cynthia McVeigh. So she was at Caledonian University where I studied psychology, and I absolutely loved the concept of psychology. And I was one of the first people to get into the field, and I loved that. But those people taught me that the freedom of your own expression is so vitally important, and that you can have a positive impact on the studies that you do, what you create, and your quizzical mind, and also how you represent that. So that's something that I've definitely taken
yeah,
forward with. But one of the things that did change my world was in the 1980s, I didn't know how to learn properly. So I don't know about you, Paul, but if you're at school
yeah,
and you're not a proper rote learner, or you're slightly different, or like our daughter who's now just going on to be a barrister, she's dyslexic, she doesn't learn in a traditional manner. Same thing with me, I'm very visual, so I didn't understand that mind maps, for example, was something that I could learn, that I could do. And I remember 19 when was it 19 was in 1990s actually. I went on something called Mind Store for Business, ran by a chap called Jack Black, not the actor, I might add, but it was in Glasgow.
Yeah.
And he helped me understand that there was something called the house on the left bank. I don't know if you've ever come across this before,
I
but it was,
have, yeah.
yeah. So house on
Yeah.
the left, where in this house that you create with all your primary colors, you have your red roof, your blue, you have blue water, you have green grass, whatever else. You create this amazing house. And in this house, you have, your entrance hall, your shower room where you get rid of all the day's pressures. You have your bedroom where you sleep and you wake up and you replenish. You have your cinema room that you can play out all the stuff that you need. And you have a library of all the information that you can recall at fingertips. But something in there was the boardroom. And the boardroom in there was to help you live your life with the people who are important to you, that's going to make a difference in your world. And that's where Nelson lives. Like literally, Nelson Mandela's in my boardroom. But alongside that boardroom, I have Richard Branson, because he's just great in terms of, overcoming adversity and screw it, let's do it. He challenges himself, he asks loads of questions and faces problems straight on. So I loved him. I have Dawn French in there because you have to have a bit of comedy, don't you? And that's all about her shifting mindset and perspective. So as much as she's a comedian, it is actually about being human and being true. So I really, really enjoy having her on my board. And also Ruby Wax is on there as well. I think some of her work is just really quite humbling in terms of she deals with her bipolar situation, her depression, and actually, what's the pressures like for her being a comedian and what does that look like? And a bit of Billy Connolly, he's in there as well.
Oh, we love Billy.
So, so these are things that are really, really important. And something that Richard Branson says, you don't get to learn to walk by following the rules. You learn by falling over and getting back up again. And these people on my boardroom help me understand that adversity is there for a reason. You're there because you want to triumph over it. And it's okay when you don't, because you're learning. Oh, and I love that.
Great. Yeah, it's great. It's interesting because Jack Black, I saw him speak back in the 90s.
Yeah, he was everywhere, wasn't he?
Yeah, and read his books and loved them. He was kind of he was a really inspirational guy. Found his talk great. That's a great list, by the way.
Oh, thanks. He was in Glasgow. I think he's a Glaswegian, actually. Great guy. Yeah. Really like him.
No, he was brilliant. He was brilliant. So on the basis of, some real inspirational people there, and it's interesting that you've named a couple of comedians there as well, and that's for me, and we know when we met, you gotta have a laugh in life, haven't you? Because if you don't, then it gets a little bit boring, a little bit dull. So linking on from there, which is quite a nice link, is there, have you got any funny stories that you could share with the listener based on your career or your travels?
Do you know career travels and funny stories? Ironically, I've got a couple that I can potentially share, but I was going to say don't laugh, but I would say laugh anyway. The very first thing was, that feeling of like you feel invincible when you're little. So Paul, I don't know, did you ever used to run around with your cape over your head and think you were like a superhero?
Yeah, definitely.
Right? In the wind, you'd be like, woohoo, this is amazing. So where we lived in Shetland, we lived we had a detached house, and one day I decided that I know what I'm going to do. It was quite windy this day, and I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll climb up the house, up the drain pipe of the house, and I'll get up to the roof, and I'll climb on the roof. Remember, I was a tomboy, so this was not an issue. So I climbed up on the roof, and I had an umbrella with me. And I was like, this is going to be great. Like, it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And I took a run and a jump off the actual roof of the house.
Yeah.
Luckily, I didn't break any bones or anything. And
wow.
we did live in a bungalow, so it wasn't 2 stories. And I picked myself back up, and it was fine. But the reason why I say that is that, a few years later, I decided that I know I'm going to jump out of a plane. So I'm just taking it a little bit further forward. I was in New Zealand at the time, and if you've ever been to New Zealand, it's one of the most beautiful places. I can highly recommend it. And there's a place called Queenstown, which if you ever fly into Queenstown, sit on the right-hand side. Everybody said, the pilot even said, if you're sitting on the right-hand side, you can see this amazing view. And all you do is you see these glacial, like beautiful turquoise blue kind of seas and glacier things. It's amazing. But Queenstown's a very small town, but it's an adrenaline junkie town. So everything associated to it is either jumping out of planes, bungee jumping, luge stuff, like you name it, you can do it. And there's a mountains range called the Incredibles, and it's way, way up. It's about 12,000 feet up, wherever. And I remember I was like, I know, I'll do a jump. I'll do a jump. Got on this tiny, tiny little plane and went up 12,000 feet. So you get to the top of where the mountains are. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's called Paradise. So it's actually a floodplain that you jump over. So it's the most phenomenal thing you could ever find out. The issue that I didn't know was that I'm actually afraid of heights. And I don't just mean a little height. I mean, I am literally terrified.
Oh, no. I don't like heights.
As we're crawling off, going up and up and up in this tiny little plane, I'm thinking, oh shit, like it's getting really, really, really stressful. And I'm just turning out, literally I've started shaking. And then when you go tandem, you get strapped into, and the guy who was strapped into was very attractive. I was like, you're lovely. So I'm trying to be really nice to this going, oh, you're really, really nice. And then I realized I'm literally terrified. And you get to the edge of the plane and they count to three. Now, what he'd forgotten to tell me was I was his sixth jump that day. He'd forgotten to tell me, if you can't breathe, all you have to do is scream and then you'll breathe. Okay. So bearing in mind that information wasn't available, I was literally petrified. I'm sitting and we're rocking and he's going, and the guy who was filming, it's hilarious. You should see the film. It's so funny. Anyway, the guy who's filming, he jumped and I'm like going, no, I'm literally grabbing onto the end of the plane. I'm like, he's grabbing me up, trying to pull me into the plane. I'm going, no, I don't want to do it. I'm screaming, do whatever else. Anyway, we jumped. And if you've ever jumped off a swimming board, like a really high one where your stomach's lurched, or you've been in a roller coaster where your stomach's lurched, okay? Imagine that about 100 times over, right? Literally your stomach leaves the building and we plummeted out, and of course you free fall, don't you, for like 2 minutes, or it felt like a lifetime. Meantime, of course, I'm thinking I'm dying, like literally I'm dying. There's a film, Paul, of me literally smacking this guy in the head, grabbing at him, pulling at him, because I genuinely believe I'm so terrified. I think I'm going to die. So anyway, we get to the bottom where the parachute eventually opens up, and then it becomes completely quiet. It's like you hear nothing, and then we land, and the adrenaline's just gone through. I've gone completely like kind of screw-eyed because there's so much adrenaline going through my system. Wow. I've literally like collapsed in a heap. So the moral of the story is I don't like heights, but the other moral of the story is that if you don't take the leap, you'll never know. So if push came to shove, I would do it again. So for example, if my children were in danger, I needed to jump out of a plane to save my life or whatever, but I now have that information. But the biggest thing is that you always have a story to tell if you take the leap. So that would be my funny story.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's a fantastic story. And you know what? Massive kudos to you for jumping out of a plane, especially if you're scared of heights, but what an experience at the same time.
Paul, I don't just mean scared of it. We went on a clip ride, the zip wires, but we got locked in, and I cried and screamed all the way around. This is how terrified I am, and we were literally only 3 meters off the ground. So if you can imagine, it was 12,000 feet.
Unbelievable. So, I go on, just if you go to the fairground, I've never been a lover of it. And you have to go on some of these rides for the kids, and I'm like terrified. And it's like the things you do for your kids, eh?
Yeah. What was interesting as well? I was going to tell you a story that was about, you remember about 2021, I did my TEDx talk. So I don't know if I told you about this, Paul. But when I did my TEDx talk, it never went live. So I got a standing ovation on the day, but my TEDx talk actually didn't go live. And I want to explain a little bit about that. It's not a funny story, but it is a story. So there was an altercation where I said something, bearing in mind I've got, borderline personality disorder. I kind of quite outspoken anyway. But I said something that was quite not embarrassing for me, but embarrassing for another person. And not in a bad way. It was never in a bad way, but it got taken in the wrong way, which meant there was kind of my TED talk never got filmed, it never got aired, but the
Oh,
standing
wow.
ovation, literally, it was everyone in tears. It was the most amazing experience of my life. But it was a slam poem that I did, 13 minutes of slam poetry about my whole neurodiversity.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to recognize is that I was actually penalized because of my neurodiversity, but because people can't see it,
Yeah.
it was like my arms and legs were cut off and I was expected to walk. I was being judged as an able-bodied person, but I'm not able-bodied. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah. It does. Yeah.
Um, and so we went to a human rights lawyer and and nobody, because it was a volunteer situation, everyone said, yeah, we've got a case, but nobody would take us on. And that literally devastated me. And the reason why I'm telling this story is not because it's not a funny story by any means or stretch of the imagination, but
Yeah.
one of the things that I want people to understand is that regardless of whatever trials or tribulations come your way, regardless of whatever happens, it's the story you tell yourself internally. And you can be broken by the environment that you have around you. So sometimes there is no controlling how people will react to you or react to the situation, or, they can't see that you've got, I don't know, liver disease, for example, or like a heart problem or something that's going on. They just see that you can't run very fast. Yeah. So what we need to understand is that sometimes people will judge you for things that are not within your control. And for me, it's about always being able to understand being unapologetically you and standing up for you that align with your own values, so that regardless of something funny happens, or you fall over, you bang your head on a lamppost, for example, people are going to laugh at you, but actually internally you're going to hurt. So what's funny to one person might not be funny to another.
Yeah.
So it's about understanding, firstly, have you got compassion for your world, but do you have compassion for you? Because sometimes people will judge you and you cannot control that. But if you're already being highly critical about yourself, just think about if you're highly critical and somebody else is highly critical as well, then that's going to be a hard call to show up in a positive light. So I wanted to throw that out there because there's adversity that will come along that can make or break you, but actually it's the story that you have for you that's the most important thing.
Oh, that's a great point, and I do believe when we talk about kindness, we have to be kind to ourselves first, sometimes
Yeah.
before we're kind to others, so that resonates with me, definitely. Just to conclude then, Chelle, if you were to give, because I mean that's like the last piece of advice in itself. If you were to yeah, if you were to give one last piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh my God, I've got so many I want to offer. The biggest tip that I can offer you is you can't control your reactions to things, but you can control to how you choose to respond. And there's a quote that I offered in my book, which was, one day you'll wake up and realize your truth, to let in the light and choose to shine. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. It's about, stop giving your power away to other people.
Yeah.
Seek acceptance. This is your story. This is about putting the crown of acceptance on your own head. Channel your energies. Make sure that if you've got that emotional turmoil going on, or that washing machine of anxiety, or that kind of debilitating situations happening, think about what you are choosing, what you actually want, rather than what is out in front of you. Don't be led by or consumed by anger or rage about it. You can always do your stomp, rant, breathe, dance, the one that I would suggest doing, a bit of fu worry time, because that's worrying's like a rocking chair. You can't, it doesn't help you. It's just something that you do. So recognizing what's important about the habits, and it's unlearning those. Something else that I would offer, my little dog's just snored her head off there saying other than rest, is give yourself permission to do things differently. What's happened in the past does not define who you are now. So absolutely. And if you have what I would call your sabotaging devil mindset, everyone has a critical mind, but do what Billy Connolly would say, do a Billy, get a fa, just push it to one side and kick it, because we don't need that in our worlds. So, even when you don't think that you've got it, you absolutely do. And even if you don't think you've got it, then just come work with me and you will have. So that's the most important thing. But, you know, making sure that you've got who you are and being unapologetically you so you can be real and show up and be seen. So, and
Great.
also if it scares the shit out of you, it probably will, but do anyway. That's what I always say, you know?
Great stuff. That's great advice. And you know, a lot of what you've talked about today, it's in the book, isn't it? It's in your book because you matter.
Oh,
And yeah,
absolutely.
you can find all of that good stuff there. And also to find you, obviously you're easily findable on LinkedIn. Got your own
Oh, yeah.
website and so
Find me.
forth.
There
Yeah.
is everything is pink in my world. I'm Chelle Verite-Shephard. I've also just launched my new website. So it's www.cvscoach.co.uk. There's lots of great people that put testimonials on there because they're just so lovely. I asked them and said, do you mind doing a little video for me? They're like, yeah, okay, that's great. But the most important thing I think here is about understanding that you need to be proud of who you are. You know, be unapologetically who you are so you can be real and show up and be seen for who you are. And if you are enjoying it, do more of it. If you're enduring it, do less. Yeah, because we all deserve to feel good, Paul. That's the whole point here.
Great stuff. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Chelle. I've really loved that. I love your concepts. I love everything that you've been talking about. So many thanks for coming on the podcast.
Absolute pleasure. And remember, because you matter, Paul.
I certainly hope so.
Here's to you thriving, not just surviving. That's the whole point, isn't it? And yeah, don't be jumping out of planes unless you really, really, really want to. But I'm sure you're not finding a height. So, you know, go for it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, not anytime soon.